You're now listening to All Hog Sports, covering all Arkansas Razorback sports, such as football, basketball, baseball, and much more. Now, here's your host for today's show, Sam Stimson.
Now, Arkansas opened SEC conference play in basketball at Starkville. Arkansas has a record of 6-21 at Starkville now. Arkansas lost 81-68 in what they call the Humphrey Coliseum. Arkansas, though, it was a rough day. They only led for 6 minutes of the game, and this time it was actually opposite. Most of the time we talk about Arkansas, and we talk about how they start slow, and then they start to, mesh and play better as a team in the second half and end up winning a game, but this wasn't true. It felt like throughout the game, Arkansas just kept playing, worse and worse, and then towards the end of the game, they started cutting back into it. The fact that this was a 13-point game, I honestly think the score lied. Arkansas flat out got beat in multiple ways. And it's important to note here, Arkansas did lose by 13 points without leading scorer J.D. Notae. Arkansas was down 3 scholarship players. J.D. Notae, averaging 18.1 points per game, was out due to an illness. It's not clear if he'll be back for Arkansas's next game in, 4 days from now. They play Vandy next week in the midweek game. Not clear if Notae will be back then. Chance Moore was out due to an illness, but he really hasn't been playing at all. And then Kamani Johnson, a forward, has been indefinitely suspended from the program. So Arkansas was only at 9 scholarship players, and you got to have 7 to play. So Arkansas did end up traveling to Starkville. I guess a bright spot in this game is Stanley Mude. He had 19 points. He was 7 out of 12 from the floor. 2 out of 4 from 3, 3 out of 4 from free throw lanes. He was really good in his 26 minutes in terms of scoring, so that was nice to see. I think the main issue with this team, though, is point guard play. And I don't know if it's necessarily the lack of point guard, and it's the lack of point guard. Last season and the year before, Arkansas had 2 tall point guards, those being... And 2 years ago, Jimmy Witt, he was 6'3". I think he's playing some G League or, minor league basketball somewhere around here in America. And the same thing is true for last year's point guard, Jalen Tate. I think he's with a G League program as well, I'm pretty sure. Both of those guys, though, 6'6", Jalen Tate. And you won't find a guy who praises Jalen Tate's game more than myself. Last season, I thought he was really underappreciated just by the way he facilitated the ball and played defense. It's obviously nice to have a taller point guard. And the thing is, Arkansas's been rotating point guards. And Notae's ran some point guard this season, and I don't think it's his best role. I think Notae's best role is a scorer. A lot of people get upset with the shots that Notae takes, and I know he didn't play in this one. But that's what Arkansas has to do to win sometimes. Notae has to make those impossible 3 points because the half-court offense is just so stagnant and we can't score. Devo has ran some point guard, and I just don't think that's the best idea either. I mean, he's been playing better offensively as a 2 or 3. He had 15 points. It was 7 out of 12 from the floor with 4 assists and 5 rebounds. He had a nice game himself, and he's been hitting some 3-pointers too because Arkansas just doesn't really have that many 3-point shooters. They shot 8 out of 27, below 30%. 29.6% was the final number there. Half percentage in the second half was 21.4%. The thing is, Arkansas just doesn't have a true point guard. Davis, I think his role is better off serve somewhere else. Same thing with Notae. And then Likes, a point guard. He didn't really run a lot of plays in Miami, but he just hasn't been able to find his role. And the thing is, all 3 of these guys are all talented. I call them point guard prospects here. Likes, Notae, Davis, they're all talented. I just don't know if their best role on the team is going to be point guard. I still think Likes' best role is going to be a spot-up shooter off the bench, because what he's really talented at is driving to the basket and, getting points. Same thing with guys like Notae, Devo. He's been playing more of the outside as well. But all 3 of those guys, they're talented. They're great hoopers. I just don't think any of them are really, going to serve that point guard role that Arkansas is looking for. I mean, Musselman didn't go with a tall point guard this year, and it hasn't worked out so far, and that doesn't mean it's not going to, because you can, get things together and find a way team can mesh together. And the thing is, there's a lot of good players on this Arkansas team. Don't get me wrong. I mean, this team has Stanley Umude, somebody who scored 20-plus point per games, last season. Tony, he looked really good at the start of the season, and he just hasn't been playing as well since. Jackson Robinson, he's starting now on this team, transfer from Texas A&M. Trey Wade. This team's really talented, but they've got things to work on. And another thing, along with the turnovers, point guard, I kind of grouped those together, is on the boards, Arkansas just hasn't been playing the best. I mean, Trey Wade was the starting 4 in this game, and he had 0 rebounds in 23 minutes. Williams picked up 7 rebounds, the leading rebounder in that category. He had 6 assists, and the reason I think Williams' number is down because we don't really have a lot of guys who are facilitating shots, and Williams is surprisingly making a high number of assists. He was doing it all season long. So there's a lot of times where Williams isn't, getting all these rebounds because he's facilitating offense as a shooting forward, making opportunities for other guys. Williams can play a good number of positions. He's a better shooter than 4 for 10 in this game. But again, I also don't think Williams will shoot 3 threes a game. I don't think that's going to be a common stat line from him. And then also with that, Vanover played 5 minutes and only got 1 rebound. It's just Arkansas hasn't been able to get rebounds, especially offensively. They only got 11 offensive rebounds compared to Mississippi State's 15. Arkansas has to be able to, play tough on those board situations, and pick up those rebounds. Jackson Robinson ended up picking 7 of those up. And then with those 11 offensive rebounds, only 3 of those were in the second half. Arkansas's defense was also poor. Man defense has what Arkansas is always going to play, and that's what Eric Musselman runs. But it's just not working out, and a lot of man defense involves switches, and teams have been switching on these smaller players like Likes and Robinson when he's in, and switching tall guards like Tolu Smith, Garrison Brooks onto Likes, and at that point, Likes is harder to guard somebody with his height disadvantage at 5'7". I think Arkansas could run some zone, but I think what zone also brings is, concern to rebounding. Arkansas is playing man right now and not rebounding that well. So when you play zone defense, is it going to get any better? That's a question that you have to ask your team. In this game, though, your points leading scorer was Umude with 19. Rebounding, Jalen Williams with 7. Jackson Robinson also had 7 rebounds, and then Jalen Williams had 6 assists. Now, Arkansas can put things together. I'm not putting it past Eric Musselman, but I think this is toughest task in all the years here at Arkansas, because if you look at the last few seasons when Arkansas kind of got in slumps, and they're in a slump right now. They've lost 3 out of the last 4, one of those games being a bye game to a Ken Palm opponent that's 320 to something, a really bad team. When you look at the last few slumps, Arkansas, yes, they did take transfers, and they're working on, developing and getting to play as a team. All that can be true. Now, the other thing is, Arkansas also had key injuries in those times. Justin Smith, at, the start of last season, was dealing with an injury, and then Isaiah Joe when the team got in their slump beforehand. And, I think Arkansas got out of that slump, and they started playing good during that slump because of Mason Jones. But the tough thing is, who's going to be the guy, if this makes sense? Last season, Arkansas had so many guys that were talented that they didn't really need what I call, quote, that guy. And if you want to be that guy, I think it could be Justin Smith, especially in the NCAA tournament. Last season was Mason Jones, and it seems like it's not really consistent this year. There's a lot of good hoopers on this team. Devo Davis, Jalen Williams, Chris Likes, Jackson Robinson, Stanley Umude, Tony. If I say all those names to you before the season, you're saying that's a preseason top 20, top 15, even top 10 team in some people's eyes. And they just haven't been able to get them to mesh. And the thing is, Arkansas still has all this talent. And I just think the most concerning part that could show why Arkansas is not going to be able to turn it around, or they could, is point guard play. That's number one for me. I think any good team has to have a good point guard. And, your options on the table are Kalen Robinson, who, he plays limited minutes, 11 minutes, and hasn't been that good, shooting a lot of three-pointers. Additionally, in those times, he got 1 assist in 11 minutes. And then Note, he's obviously out, but again, your top scorer, your best scoring option, Devo Davis, who's become a lot better at scoring. He had 4 assists in that game. And then you look at Chris Likes as well, but I think that height advantage could be a little concerning there. I still think they're all good players, though. We just have to find somebody who can play point guard. Because if Arkansas is playing a different point guard every game, the offense isn't going to get any better from half court. Arkansas fast break points only put up 9. Points off turnovers were only 12 points as well. I think if Arkansas wants to, win a lot more games, they're going to have to play in transition, because our transition offense is better than the half-court offense that we're running. The half-court offense is just so stagnant, and it's turnover-worthy. 17 turnovers. That is just such a tough point. Mississippi State ended up scoring 25 points off turnovers. Again, the problems for this team, I think there's a good amount of them that are going to be worked out. I don't think that there will be the rebounding issue in every game. I think this is obviously a touch matchup. Mississippi State's a very veteran-led team. They've got a lot of guys who've been playing SEC ball for a while. Tolu Smith, Iverson Molinar. Again, you won't have to face these guys every single game as veteran-led. But to say it gets any easier, I think, is a hard thing to say if you look at Arkansas's schedule, just because of the SEC grind. It gets a little bit easier for Arkansas, though. Tuesday, January 4th, they'll play Vanderbilt. I'll have a preview up on that episode later. But then you travel to Texas A&M. Arkansas's currently in that game. They'd probably be like a 1 or 2 point underdog, maybe a pick 'em there. Then they play Missouri at home. That should be a win. And then where it really gets tough is you got to travel to Baton Rouge to play an LSU team who only has 1 loss. And then it gets significantly easier, though. South Carolina, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, West Virginia, Georgia, Mississippi State. So there's a lot of wins in Arkansas' schedule still. They won't be playing at a Mississippi State team that is probably going to go to the NCAA tournament, and they won't be playing in a tough environment like that. I say tough environment, even though there was 1,000 people in that crowd, if I'm being generous, to be honest. But the Arkansas just hasn't played good at that stadium. And Ben Howland always plays that type of ball. And you look at a lot of SEC coaches, play a lot of physical teams in the conference. South Carolina's very physical, Missouri, Mississippi State kind of goes along those marks. So yeah, Arkansas basketball, lots of issues to be worked through. But it's December 30th right now. Right now, this team is obviously not a NCAA tournament caliber program. I would not choose them in the big dance now. Maybe an IT team. I don't know. I don't keep up with that. But Arkansas is going to have to find a way to guard the 3. 323rd in three-point defense, and then also shoot the 3. Arkansas is shooting 24.7% from 3 this year. Good for 317th in D1. So yeah, lots of things to work on for the Hogs, but we have a good coach. That is true. And, we can work through these issues. Be optimistic. Anyway, I'll catch y'all later, though. And as always, Woo Pig Suey. Make sure to listen to the Outback preview from yesterday if you haven't yet. Hogs play bowl game tomorrow. So, yeah, go Hogs. Beat Penn State. Woo Pig.
That's all for today's episode of All Hog Sports with Sam Stimson. Make sure to stay tuned for the next episode covering all Arkansas Razorback sports. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media too. On Twitter and Instagram at All Hog Sports Pod. Like on Facebook at All Hog Sports and Arkansas Razorbacks Podcast. And on YouTube at that same name. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Go Hogs!